guys, June here, and in this video we're talking about everyone's new favorite technique, 4-tick auto-attacking. If you haven't watched the previous video in which we talked about general dual wield and two-hand switching, I would strongly recommend clicking the card on screen and watching the second half of that video to get a more intuitive grasp of how the auto-attack system works. We'll also need a few things to use this strategy effectively. First, we need a wand, an orb, and a staff of roughly the same tier and with roughly equivalent perks. Switching up or down a few tiers is perfectly fine, however if you're dropping 10 tiers to use these techniques, the DPS gain is going to be offset by the weaker ability damage with the alternating weapon. We also obviously need runes, but in this case we actually need quite a large quantity of runes because this technique burns through them very quickly as opposed to normal ability rotations. Lastly, if you intend to make this your standard rotation when you're using magic, you'll probably want some kind of extra hardware with programmable buttons like a gaming mouse or pad. The level of effort in terms of input scales up as you more heavily integrate 4-ticking into your rotation. When fully integrated to the point that you're doing one auto attack for every ability used, something that people generally refer to as continuous 4-tick auto attacking, the level of effort is easily 3 or 4 times as much as any type of normal ability rotation. The more different options you have for customizing your keybinds, generally the easier you'll be able to make this for yourself. Before we start, it's also worth noting that the central idea of 4-tick auto-attacking centers around a bug whereby if you manually cast a spell from the bar, the auto-attack from that spell goes through a tick early, and although Jagex has come out with either a neutral or maybe somewhat favorable stance on 4-tick auto-attacking, this still constitutes bug abuse and I would never want to encourage any kind of rule breaking in these videos. So to get started, let's take a look at how 4-tick auto-attacking actually works. So here we've got our game ticks plotted out on screen, and let's say we start off by using any non-channeled ability with our wand and orb. These are fastest attack speed weapons, and so they put our auto attacks on a 4-tick cooldown. This means if we were so inclined, we could stop using abilities at this point, and in that case we'd get an auto attack on this 5th tick. As we talked about in the previous video on dual wield and two-hander switching, we'd also want to make sure we swap to a staff to make sure we get a more powerful auto attack after using that dual wield ability. The last part of making this technique work is the bug we briefly mentioned where you're manually casting your spell from the bar. Normally this would be some kind of a damaging spell like Air Surge or Ice Barrage for example, but this can also be done with other types of spells like Vulnerability and other debuffs as well as things like Entangle, which makes this a very versatile technique that can also be employed for things like bind combos. Manually casting the spell via the bar causes it to go through a tick early, on the 4th tick instead of the 5th tick, hence the name 4-tick auto-attacking. The combination of the switch from the dual wield to the staff to get a more powerful auto attack, the extra 1-tick stall so that you get your auto on the 4th tick, and using the bug by casting the spell directly from the bar to make sure that it goes through on the 4th tick instead of the 5th tick are the 3 fundamentals of doing 4-tick auto attacking. When and how you incorporate this into your ability rotation is very versatile and more or less left up to your decision, however there are usually 2 ways that this is done. One of the most common ways would be to follow up this 4-tick auto-attack cycle with any ability used with a staff, and then after you use that staff ability you'd switch back to dual wield and simply repeat this cycle over again. This is what that tends to look like in practice. Take note of the fact that you can see the Air Surge animation actually moving between me and the target, however you don't see me doing the auto-attacking animation with my staff. This is really the key to knowing that you got the timing correct. If you don't see the auto attack actually happening, chances are you're using your follow-up ability too early, and if you see the auto attack animation starting with your actual player model, you stalled for too long. Using this method, you get 1 auto attack for every 2 abilities used, and when compared to continuous 4-tick auto attacking, the level of effort here is actually quite minimal. There's less precision timing involved because you get the full length of the global cooldown to switch your weapon each time that you need to do so. Overall, this one pattern in particular is actually quite easy, and I expect most of you would be able to get the hang of it after just a few minutes of practice at Dummies. For the more advanced technique, we need to not only do our auto attack, but also our wand and orb switch before using that follow-up ability, all on that same 4th tick. As you might guess, this group of actions in particular is something that some players use macros for. These 4 actions need to be done in this correct order, and the time frame to do so is only 0.6 of a second, so that can be very difficult to time without macros, but the reason we do this is so that when we use the ability following that 4-tick auto attack, it's registered as having done so with dual wield weapons, putting our auto attacks on the same cooldown, meaning we can get a 4-tick auto attack after every single ability. This is what that looks like in practice, and again we can verify that we're doing this correctly by making sure we see the animation for the auto attack itself moving between us and the target, but not the animation from the casting of the auto attack being done with our actual weapon. So let's go back to our original slower method of 4-tick auto attacking and see if we can get a handle on the chain of inputs as well as the timing to do this correctly. Our first action, starting with our wand and orb equipped, is to use any of our non-channeled abilities. In here we'll use Dragon Breath, and immediately after we'll switch to our staff. Here's where the tricky timing comes in. We need to do our autocast manually as well as our follow-up ability with the staff equipped right on the 4th tick, which conveniently happens to be immediately after the global cooldown icon on each of your abilities expires. If we keep an eye on our ability icon, every time we use one there's a quick animation that moves clockwise that demonstrates the length of the global cooldown. The timing for doing the auto attack as well as the follow-up ability is immediately after this animation has expired. This is the trickiest part of 4-tick auto-attacking to get acquainted with, and it's also very difficult to explain, so I highly recommend you take a few minutes at Dummies to practice the timing. So when we see that timer expire, we'll use our auto-attack as well as our follow-up ability. In this case I'm using Sonic Wave. After that we get 3 ticks within which to switch back to our wand and orb before using the next ability. This brings us back to where we started in the rotation, and we would simply cycle that forever, substituting in different abilities as those are on cooldown. Now let's try to do the same thing with the more advanced continuous 4-tick auto-attacking method. We're starting in the same way by having our wand and orb equipped and using a non-channeled ability. Anytime during the global cooldown of that ability we can do our staff switch. Then, on exactly the same timing as in the last example, we need to do our spell, then our wand, then our orb, then our follow-up ability, all within the same game tick. We then only have a short moment to do our staff switch. Then again on the 4th tick we'll put in the same 4 inputs, however substituting in a different ability. This rotation really just boils down to 2 alternating actions, the staff switch and then the cluster of 4 inputs just alternating different abilities in that 4th slot. So as you can probably tell, either of these techniques can be used without setting much structure to your ability rotation. For that reason, before we close out the video, I want to set a few guidelines for your rotation that help preempt some of the mistakes that I see people commonly making with 4-tick auto-attacking. The first I would hope goes without saying, but don't neglect Asphyxiate simply because you can't get a 4th tick auto-attack after it because it's a channeled ability. Asphyxiate is hugely powerful, and especially during Sunshine it's a central part of your rotation, and even when you're doing 4-tick auto-attacking or continuous 4-tick auto-attacking, you should definitely have the objective of getting 2 Asphyxiates in every Sunshine. Secondly, even if your objective is to do continuous 4-tick auto-attacking, it is okay to occasionally use Concentrated Blast or Sonic Wave. Magic simply doesn't have enough strong basic abilities to make a long-term continuous 4-tick auto-attack rotation without having to resort to using your fundamentally very weak abilities like Rack. For this reason alone, it's better to occasionally substitute in one of these abilities as filler to make sure that your overall ability rotation has a high damage density. Just as an example, if we're starting a Sunshine rotation with Dragon Breath, we can get a 4-tick auto-attack after that. However, we may want to do a Concentrated Blast into Wild Magic and then resume our continuous 4-tick auto-attacking pattern after that Wild Magic. The third and final thing to keep in mind is that your adrenaline gain will be a little bit slower when using 4-tick auto-attacking methods because the adrenaline per tick from an auto-attack is slightly lower than that of using an ability. This issue is compounded by the fact that there's a bug regarding ancient spells that causes you not to gain adrenaline from auto-attacks, so whenever possible you should be avoiding using ancient magics and stick to standard spells when doing 4-tick auto-attacking. As long as you're sticking to standard magics, the adrenaline gain shouldn't be slowed down so much that it makes a significant impact on your rotation, but it is something to keep in mind. Hopefully these and other principles that we learned from earlier videos in this playlist can help you improvise your own 4-tick auto-attacking rotations. This is by far the most difficult concept to grasp about RuneScape combat, and as a result I feel like the technical breakdown in this video wasn't quite as easily understandable as some of the more simple videos that I make. For that reason, I'm going to fill the video description of this video with links to other YouTubers and their videos explaining 4-tick auto-attacking. If you find that after watching this video you still have no idea what's going on, I would strongly recommend taking a watch through those. Some of them explain it from a different perspective and may be more useful in helping you understand it. Thank you guys as always for watching. I know this can be a tough subject, so as always I'm open for questions in the comments section. On the bright side, this is also definitely the most complex thing RuneScape combat has to offer, and so everything else that we cover is going to be downhill from here. As always, a huge thanks to Wumpry for his support on Patreon. I wish everyone a happy new year, and I'll see all of you guys in the next video.